Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We are closing in on the midway point of the 2026 to 2027 NHL season. Blackhawks have been respectable so far. We're tied for third in the division with the Dallas Stars, and you can see we're tied with them for sixth in the Western Conference. So we would be in the playoffs if the season were to end today. Thus far, the little bit of a youth movement we've had with the Blackhawks has worked out pretty well. Our new goalie, Jesper Wellstedt, who we traded away our next two first rounders for to the Wild, has had a really nice year for us. 18-8-3 record, 251 goals against, .925 save percentage with two shutouts. So he has been excellent for us. And we've also gotten contributions from a number of rookies. The defenseman Sam Rinzel, left wing Victor Eklund, who we picked in the first round about a year and a half ago, as well as Frank Nazar, who was picked right before we took over the Blackhawks. And we've also had some production from Nathan Villeneuve, who we drafted a couple years ago. So some of the young players have been helping us. Philip Hronik, our longtime defenseman, out indefinitely with a ruptured UCL. He's going to be 30 in the not so distant future. Also going to be a free agent after this year, so it's conceivable that he may have played his last game with us. And then we made a trade for Lauri Paganami from the Rangers. He has been, this is his second trip on the injured list for us this year. Going to be out with a fractured thumb for 2 to 3 weeks. Does have 4 goals in 15 games for us. Brought him on to provide a little bit of offense, but honestly, the youngsters that we brought on board have been a lot more effective on that front thus far. Beginning of January now, taking a look at the schedule for the month. Pretty even split, it looks like, between home and road games. So hopefully we can continue to play pretty good hockey. Hopefully get to a point where we're feeling a little more confident that we're not just on the verge of being out of the playoffs. Right now, 41 points is the last in the playoffs in the Western Conference, and then 40 is the first team out. So we're only 3 points up on the Coyotes in terms of not even being in the playoffs at this point. So it would be nice if we could string a few wins together this month and not be headed into late March and April worrying about whether or not we're going to be a playoff team, but instead worrying about seeding at that point. Team harmony, still excellent. Job security, pretty good in terms of what ownership is thinking of us. The fans are still definitely mixed, as had a disappointing season last year, missing the playoffs, and we've gotten rid of a few first-round picks, as I mentioned, to bring Wellstat on board, and we also raised ticket prices on the fans. So hopefully we can continue to do a little better on the ice in the month of January to win over the fans in Chicago, and more importantly, get in a position to be well positioned for the playoffs in a few months. And we're nearing the end of January. Our former captain, Patrick Kane, just reached 1,500 points. Looks like he's got 10 goals and 20 assists in 46 games for the Stars this year. Could probably have used him over the last few weeks because it's been a pretty rough stretch for the Blackhawks here. We did win against the Bruins to start off the month, and then we won against Anaheim and Calgary. So we did win 3 of our first 4 games in the new year. Since then, however, it's been a pretty brutal run with just 2 wins in our last 9 games. I have 2 left at home before the end of the month against Vancouver and Arizona. Hopefully we can get the team on a bit of a roll in those 2 games, because right now we are desperately hanging on to that 8th playoff spot in the Western Conference. But we're only up a point on the Jets and the Predators, and 3 points on the Oilers for that spot. So things have gotten a little tighter as the Blackhawks have been playing pretty mediocre hockey over the last several weeks. And if it's possible, things got even worse in those last two home games with 4-1 and 7-2 losses to Vancouver and Arizona. So as we begin the month of February, we've got the All-Star break right now, and then we're going to have to get things back on track and get them back on track quickly, because we are rapidly dropping in the Western Conference standings. You can see we're the first team out of the playoffs right now, but we are 3 games behind the Predators for that second wild card spot. The only positive thing is that we do have a game or two in hand on several of the teams that we are chasing, but it's been a really bad month of January for the Blackhawks. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Only positive is that a lot of our younger players really developed well in January. Eklund, Holloway, Jaracek, Korchinski, Rinzel, and Sillinger all kind of improving at the NHL level. With the injuries that we are still trying to overcome, most notably that indefinite injury to Filip Hronek, we should have Villeneuve back shortly. But we have, with the fact that we started the season with a lot of money under the cap, and Hronek, who's a pretty high-priced player, is injured right now, a lot of money to potentially take on salary if we can figure out something that's reasonably economical to do to improve our team. Unfortunately, the trade block doesn't have anyone overwhelmingly incredible on it. A lot of, not even a lot, a handful of kind of 3-star players. Don't know that there's anyone who's going to make a huge difference for us. I guess Torrey Krug could be a decent offensive defenseman, but honestly, we've been allowing so many goals that if anything, we probably want to tighten up our defense on the blue line. So, and I also don't know that we want to go giving up a ton to try to get this team into the playoffs. Obviously, we want to get into the playoffs, but the way we've been playing over the last month or so, don't really think that we're positioned to make a long run, even if we do get there. So if we can find some talent over the next month or so till the trade deadline, we'll do it. But I don't think we want to do anything that's going to result in less playing time for the likes of Nazar, Eklund, Rinzel, even Jaracek, and Wallstedt has definitely come back to earth more recently. You can see the record has slipped to 21, 15, and 3. Save percentage down, goals against average up. Skarek, 4 and 6 record hasn't been great as our backup goalie. Hopefully a little time off, a week and a half with no games to clear everyone's heads during the All-Star break will allow us to be in a better position when we come back, because right now the fans are not pleased with how this team is doing, and I can't really blame them. It's been a real rough stretch, especially the last couple weeks. In kind of an interesting evaluation from owner Rocky Wirtz for the month, he's satisfied with our performance, which is not shocking, but he says that we're a serious contender and we should be looking for players to help us right now. I don't know that I agree with that assessment, but if we can find someone who's a good bargain, we'll certainly think about bringing them on board in the coming weeks. And as we get closer to the All-Star break, or closer to the All-Star game, I guess we're on the All-Star break, Villeneuve is back and healthy, so we're going to put him on the active roster. I think we may shop Hronek. I don't know why anyone would want him when he's out indefinitely with a ruptured UCL, except for the fact that they get him in their building and maybe they can sign him to an extension. But with the money that he is looking for, almost $8 million a year, and the fact that he's going to be turning 30 next season, he's coming off of a serious injury, we will have money to spend. I just don't know if we want to spend it on Hronek. I guess we could go with Forsling, but Forsling is even older. and I think he's going to be looking for pretty big money too, almost $5 million a year. So not as much as Hronek, obviously, and he's healthier right now. Could be a very different looking Blackhawks team next year than it is right now. First thing we need to do, though, is just figure out who we're going to get rid of to make room for Mr. Villeneuve back on the roster. He only played 16 games for us before he got hurt. Had been -7, which certainly isn't great, but he did score 3 goals and is a guy who we'd like to see continue to get some playing time because we think that he can be a pretty impactful player for us down the road. Pretty good physical, defensive, and offensive ratings, just not all that advanced mentally right now. But he is a 20-year-old who's gone right from the OHL into the NHL. So some growing pains are definitely to be expected. And with Villeneuve back, we may try to trade away Jason Dickinson again. I think we tried in our last episode, and there was no demand for him, so we ended up moving him to the minors, and we're able to get him there. He has still no offers for Dickinson, so we are going to see if we can send Mr. Dickinson down to the AHL, find out whether or not he clears waivers. That'll put us with a 23-man roster. I am going to just see what... I can't imagine anyone's going to want Hronek. Like I said, the only way would be to get him in the building if there's someone who's going to be fighting for him as a free agent next year. But if we're not willing to spend $8 million for him and we can get anything for him, we probably should. And there's a bunch of offers for him. Wow, a little surprised. Don't know what those offers are going to be, but we'll... old players, wonder what the type of... a lot of old guys, presumably in the last years of their contracts, interested. I'm guessing it'll be a 7th round pick, if a 5th round pick. Not horrible for a guy who is not going to be doing anything for us next year. I think we may just trade him for a 5th rounder unless one of these young guys that we're getting offered has some potential, but quite honestly, they look like they're kind of very marginal roster guys for a good NHL team. But surprised there is so much demand for a guy who is out indefinitely and headed to free agency. But I think we will take a 5th rounder for him and at least get something. Looks like we got a 5th rounder from the Wild. I believe the Blues, the Sabres. Kings and the Flyers. I think those were the teams. Any of those teams really bad this year? The Blues in our own division are in last place. Flyers aren't great. Were the Red Wings one of those teams? Oof, some brutal teams out in the Pacific. Oof. So we're going to go ahead and deal Hronek to the Blues for a 5th round pick in the upcoming draft. So the good news is we don't have anyone on the injured list anymore. The bad news is that we still are not a playoff team if the season were to end today. Don't think that the trade block has changed materially since the last time we checked in. Actually, there is a pretty high potential guy in Loic Mubernamwe out of the AHL. A weird player to see on the trade block. Scout thinks he's got pretty good potential. Versatile defenseman who could be as good as Quinn Hughes, gets along well with everyone. A little slow at times. Wonder what they're looking for him. Not someone who's going to help us now, but someone who our scouts think is a 4.5-star player, or a 21-year-old defenseman who can play on the left or the right side. Wouldn't be the worst thing to potentially get, given that we've just moved on from one of our veteran top defensemen. If we could flip the pick that we just got for him, that would be something to think about. I guess we got to put in a player or some rights also. We got rights to any old players that we're never going to sign. Not so much at this point, honestly. Liam Wildner. I think he's a top player. He certainly has top player potential. I don't think he's a top player quite yet. Third rounder and a second rounder. Now they've got, I don't know, it's kind of weird, and we don't have first rounders until 2029 now, and they wouldn't even accept a first and 2 seconds, 3 seconds for him. So we are not going to be going after Loic Mubernamwe. I just think it's a little weird for that player to even be on the trade block, particularly since they're looking for a ton for him. They're wanting you to pay full price for whatever his potential happens to be. Just kind of weird to see a 21-year-old on the trade block where they're still thinking they're going to get full value for him. And the all-star rosters have been announced. Quinn Hughes, our defenseman, who's got 38 points in 48 games, named an all-star. And also Mitch Marner, the right winger, who has 49 points, including 20 goals in 48 games, named to the all-star team. So after being blanked last year, nice to at least have a couple of all-stars for the Blackhawks this year. But hopefully we can... more importantly than having guys in the all-star game, hopefully we can have some guys in the playoffs, like 23 guys in the playoffs at the end of this season. And we're getting ready to play our first game after the all-star break. You can see we're now behind Winnipeg also, who have played a game yesterday and moved past us in the standings. So we are only a point, we're 3 points out of the playoffs at this point, and there's a number of teams that we're battling with for that final wild card spot in the Western Conference. So what I think I'm going to do now, I still am inclined to be a buyer, depending on what happens over the next couple of weeks. But I think I am going to spend a little bit of time looking through our guys in the final year of their contract right now. And if I'm not going to make an offer to somebody, at least I'm going to put them out there on the trade block to see if maybe someone wants to bite on them. Forsling, we're going to put on the trade block. I don't think we want to be paying him over $5 million a year. I don't know that anyone's going to strike for him, but if they do, we would listen. Luke Kunin, who is making $5.75 million, looking to make close to $7 million. I don't see that being a contract that we want to give out. After a pretty weak start to his career, his first year with us, he was good last year, but he's been pretty unproductive offensively again this year. He's basically been the definition of an average player in terms of his plus minuses over the 3 years he's been with the Blackhawks. I don't see us giving him an offer for $7 million. So we're going to put him on the trade block also. Again, I don't know if anyone's really going to chase after either of those guys, but we're willing to listen. Dylan Holloway is a tougher case, and Cole Sillinger also. Holloway's a 25-year-old, kind of has been the 21st, 22nd kind of player on our roster this year, not playing every game, only 24 games played. And he's looking for over $4 million a year. I just don't see that being a contract that we're going to give him. I will auto-qualify him just so if someone offers him a big deal or any deal, we can at least think about it. And I am also going to put him on the trade block. If someone really wants him, we're willing to listen. Sillinger to me is the toughest. He's looking for decent money, but you can see our scouts think he's got 4.5-star potential. Scored 26 points in 47 games this year. Scouts think he can be better than Luke Kunin, which again is not saying a ton at this point. Like the fact that he can play both center and left wing pretty proficiently. He's a good young player that we think still has pretty good potential. He's looking for $5.4 million. We're definitely going to auto-qualify him. I'm going to see what he thinks about $4.75 million. I know it's not quite what he's looking for, but at least want to have the discussion with him. He's a guy who I wouldn't mind locking up. Yeah, he definitely wants more than that. If we could get him for 5.25, I think that would be a pretty reasonable deal. And he's willing to think about $5.25 million for 3 years. So we're going to go ahead and submit that offer to him. So hopefully we'll get Sillinger signed. And then other than that, Forsling, Holloway, and Kunin are the last players we have in the last years of their contract that we haven't extended. Put them all on the trade block. Maybe an offer will come in for them that's interesting. And we're going to keep looking at the trade block as we get further through this month of February. And obviously a lot depends on how we do on the ice as to which direction we end up going. Well, the good news is we came out of the All-Star break with a win at the Rangers, 6-4. Got 3 assists from Konechny, a couple of goals from Gavin Hayes. So that was good. Bad news is Rasmus Anderson hurt, going to be out for about 6 days. And then Alec Regula involved in an off-ice incident that has Travis Konechny, Sam Rinzel, and Kevin Korchinski all displeased with him. Cole Sillinger did sign his contract, so he's going to be with us for another 3 years. But we're going to have to figure out what we want to do with Regula. Our job security is getting lower, and now Team Harmony has some issues with a lot of people having some problems with Mr. Regula, particularly given that Regula is kind of the 7th guy on our team. He's a guy that we had down in the AHL earlier in the year. Probably makes sense to just move on from him right now, because we do have some other good young defensemen that we're going to want to figure out what they can do for us in the not-so-distant future, given that we've already moved on from Hronek and we could be moving on from Forsling. Matteo Rotundi has been down there this year, the 21-year-old. Has been pretty solid, plus 10 in 32 games. Might not be the worst thing to get him up on the active roster at the NHL level. Not sure exactly how much we are going to get for Regula at this point, but we're going to at least find out. There's very minimal interest. Can get a mediocre 31-year-old defenseman, a mediocre 33-year-old right wing, 27-year-old left winger Mikhail Shalagin, or a 6th-round draft pick from the Panthers. We are going to just go ahead and trade him to the Panthers for that 6th-rounder, and we are going to move a former 1st-round draft pick from our first draft with the Blackhawks up to the big club Matteo Rotundi, welcome to the National Hockey League. So Rotundi moving up to Chicago as the youth movement continues. Hopefully we can get him some playing time. Will be interesting to see in training. Is he overwhelmed at this level? I hope not. Nope, it looks like Quinn Hughes is unhappy, which is not great, but at least Rotundi is not overwhelmed at this level. But why is Quinn Hughes not happy? His ice time? Is he getting too much ice time with 24 minutes plus a game? That seems like a weird thing to be unhappy with. His ice time, maybe it's too high. It's as high as it's ever been in his 2 years with the Blackhawks. Looking over the course of his career, I guess there is no ice time tracked over the course of his career. But 24 minutes a game doesn't seem to be something to be complaining about. And he was also claiming that he was upset with team morale spending, which is actually as high as it can possibly be. So I'm going to hope that Quinn Hughes was just having a bad day, and that's not anything that's going to become a major issue for us. And with Rasmus Anderson still dealing with that sore hand, he's only at 80% fitness, so we're going to let Rotundi make his NHL debut. Both Forsling and Hughes can also play on the right side, so we still should be fine as far as positioning of our defensemen. See if we can win a second in a row on the road against the Habs. And we did get a 6-1 win against Montreal, so the team is definitely playing better coming out of the break here. Paul Cotter with a shoulder strain, supposedly day-to-day. Probably will miss our next game on the road in Ottawa as we continue our tour of northeastern Canada. I guess it's actually southeastern Canada. I'm calling it northeastern as someone who's living below the border. And the trade deadline is just a few days away. Huge games at Minnesota and home against Edmonton after a decent start to the month of February, where we had won 4 of our first 5. We've now lost 2 in a row. These last 2 games are going to be kind of critical to figuring out what our plan is. And then we will be home against Seattle and then home against Philadelphia on trade deadline day. So we've got potentially 4 games left to figure out exactly what we want to do. With 61 points, we're still on the outside of the playoffs looking in. Now in the 11th spot, and we are 5 points out of the playoffs. So if these games against Minnesota, who we are chasing, and Edmonton, who we're only ahead of by a point, don't go well, we may be sellers, and we may be a team that is looking to potentially miss the playoffs for a 3rd time in 5 seasons in this playthrough, which is not a good track record. We're banking on that championship that we won in our 2nd season to help us keep our job, but kinks in the armor are starting to show, and the fans are not pleased with our performance, and it really hasn't been good. And we lost at the Wild 3-2, and Eklund is going to be out for about 10 days. I have always hated this bug that they say the injury puts him in the press box. I honestly don't know that when players are injured, they go and they hang out with the media, but maybe I'm misunderstanding something about hockey. But Eklund is going to be out. We'll throw him on to the IL just so we can bring up another body to help us. But we are quickly getting into a situation where there may be no help for us. I would have loved to bring up Mathis Dubé, but he's out with a ruptured tendon for 2 to 3 months. So he is not capable of helping us right now. So I think we would go back to Riley Green, who did play 1 game for us earlier this year, even though he was up for a period of a few weeks. Only saw action once for us. But if we lose today against Edmonton at home, it's going to get hard for us to think that we should not be sellers as we close in on the trade deadline. And we did suffer an overtime loss at home to Edmonton. It is getting close to being an unsalvageable situation for us, I think. We've played 60 games at this point, or we played 58 games. So we've got 24 games to go, 5 games out of a wild card spot. Only got to hop over 1 team or 2 teams to get there. 1 team to be the closest team to being out. We've just been playing so mediocre since the calendar turned to 2027 that I don't know how that's magically going to change. Going to see what happens in this game against Seattle. And then we've got the home game against Philadelphia. But it's getting hard for me to think that we're going to magically win 10 games in the month of March and put ourselves in a real good position to make the playoffs. But that said, we do still have 24 games to go. We have a team that I liked when we broke camp back in October, but just have not performed on the ice as well as I would have hoped. And the young guys are developing nicely. Korchinski, Nazar, and Rotundi, especially since he called up, all showing some pretty significant growth at the NHL level. Forsling and Kunin, 2 of the guys that we've put on to the trade block, are moving in the wrong direction. Probably not going to re-sign either of them. Interesting that St. Louis is already flipping Philip Hronek. It looks like he's 3 to 4 months away, but I do not really understand that trade on their front unless maybe they tried to sign him and they realized he was looking for more money than they wanted to give him. Just going to take a quick peek at team attendance here. Still have 25 home sellouts, 104 capacity. So when we look at the monthly budget, definitely don't need to invest heavily in game promotion. Going to continue investing in player happiness and scouting support. Critical game today against the Kraken. It's kind of sad that like 1 game could determine the direction our season goes, but that's kind of the point that we find ourselves in, unfortunately. And as the month of March begins, we lost 3-0 to Seattle, got shut out at home. Fans are very unhappy. They view us as a problem, but Rocky Wirtz is still satisfied with us and says replacing us is out of the question. So they are questioning what we're going to do with Gustav Forsling at this point. Going to take a quick look now at what else is on the trade block out there. There are some difference-making type of players at this point, so at least we have something to think about here. I just don't know how much we really want to give up for somebody in the last year of his contract. Like, I think that a Ty Smith or a Tony DeAngelo could definitely help us. But, you know, what type of compensation are we going to have to get to pick up a player like that? Because we are not in a position where we should be giving up a lot of talent to go tilting at the windmills that are our playoff chances here. Yeah, I mean, a first rounder and a second rounder for a rental, and we're not even there. So I tend to think we're not going to be buyers just because the prices are too high, but I'll spend a little time investigating the options that are out there. But I'm tending to think, given that we're not a real contender, it doesn't make sense to go crazy to bring somebody on board. And the prices for the big time players that are out there. We also checked in on Smith, DeBrincat, Bavillier. They're just way too high for a team that has given up its next two first rounders, so we don't have a ton of high end draft capital to trade to begin with. And we're also a marginal team. I don't know that we're one player away from being a true contender. So we are not going to be buyers. I think the only question now is the players that we are likely to move on from. Do we actively shop them and see what we can get? I don't know what's going to be out there for a Luke Kunin, but that's probably the reason to ask. I don't think we're going to get blown away with offers for any of these guys, but if we're not going to make an effort to sign them for the long term, can we get someone who's young or a useful draft pick? It doesn't look like there's anyone all that exciting out there for Mr. Kunin. Tobias Bjornfot, decent stay-at-home defenseman. Doesn't bring much on the offensive side. Making almost $3 million a year. What do our scouts think of him? Not a bad player. He can play on the left. He can play on the right if we have to play him there. Just doesn't bring a lot offensively, but he's strong mentally, pretty strong physically, and pretty good defensively. Plus he's got a cool name, Bjornfot. Like him better than Jacob Dion. I don't know. I mean, we're not going to bring Kunin back. He's been pretty unproductive while we've had him. And he's looking for almost $7 million a year and a no trade clause. I would hope that we could get more than Tobias Bjornfot for him. But a decent stay-at-home, old-school kind of defenseman is not the worst thing in the world to get. He's just so bad offensively. But it is something. Something is better than nothing. Speaking of defensemen, what can we get from Mr. Forsling? Because I'm assuming he's still looking for around 4.7 million, so you could probably get him for mid-4s. But he's getting older also. I think it's probably time for us to move on from Mr. Forsling. A little bit of demand for him also, nothing crazy. 6th round pick. Ugh, brutal. 6th round picks or old defenseman or a pretty mediocre prospect. And I guess we're probably also getting close ourselves to the salary floor. Yeah, we can probably only get rid of one of those guys. If we're not going to bring them back, I feel like we might as well get something for them. So I'm going to trade Kunin for Tobias Bjornfot. give us another defenseman. And we're going to need another defenseman because we're going to be trading away Gustav Forsling to either Tampa or Philadelphia, depending on who's worse for a somewhat useless 6th-round pick. Tampa's a little worse than Philadelphia right now. They're both pretty bad. So we'll go ahead and say, what did we do to pick up Forsling? It's amazing how the value of players. Oh, we signed him as a free agent. We didn't trade for him. Okay. Go ahead and complete that trade as well. So that leaves us with our 7 defensemen, but a different group with Bjorn Fott now. And we need to bring up another everyday player. Eklund will be back very shortly, hopefully. But we are going to need another body on the front line until then. And I don't want to say we're throwing in the towel on this season because I don't think the loss of either of those guys is going to be critical to our potential success. Might as well see if there's any demand for Dylan Holloway. He's a little younger, so I guess there's a chance maybe we might get something more interesting for him, and the team will have the opportunity to match any offer on him. But there's nobody interested. That's quite a tell right there. So the season's kind of going off the rails here. We're going to continue the youth movement. Don't know who we're going to bring up. And we brought another youngster up, the 23-year-old Evan Kanyan, who had started the year in the ECHL where he was pretty productive, moved up to the AHL about a month ago, played 8 games there, -6, so he wasn't particularly effective, but we'll see what he can do. Actually, we probably won't see too much of what he can do because he's probably only going to be up with us for a little while till we get Eklund back, and he may not even be playing against Philadelphia tomorrow. Again, I'm not writing off the season. I don't think that the departures of Forsling and Kunin are us completely throwing in the towel. We're getting what we can get for them. We weren't going to re-sign them. We're 6 points out of the playoffs right now, although we do have a game in hand on the team that we're chasing, but obviously not in a great position. Hopefully we can play better over the final 23 games of the year and sneak into the playoffs, but if not, at least we got a tiny bit of value for the guys that we were going to be moving on from at the end of this year anyways. And because I wasn't paying attention, I didn't realize that we're about $1 million below the $61 million salary floor after those 2 moves. I was thinking about it when we were trading away the first trade. Didn't think about it when we made the second trade. So now we've got to find someone expensive on waivers, but of course there's nobody on waivers. So we're going to have to trade for some garbage player and probably give up most of the assets that we just got to bring on someone who's making more money than they deserve to be making. The season isn't going well, if you can't tell. So we want a pretty mediocre player who's making some decent money. If they're a forward, all the better. I think we'd want them in the last year of their contract. Noel Acciari. What do the Bruins want for him? Better not be much. Yes, I think we're offering way too much, giving them Liam Wilner also. Maybe we can get a pick back in return. So you can get a bunch of 5th round picks. All right, so we'll give them the rights to Liam Wilner, and they'll send us Acciari and a bunch of late round picks. We don't have a lot of time. Actually, we've got to get this to work right now, though, don't we? Because make this work. All right, let's offer the trade. Let's make a deal. Let's finalize the trade. All right, so we've got our crappy player who's making a lot of money to get us over the floor. Sorry to Mr. Kanyan. You're going back to the AHL. We hardly knew ye, but you will probably be back soon. But we'll take on Acciari. We should take on another crappy player that people want to dump the salary of. So we did win against Philadelphia on trade deadline day, 3-1. So we are 5 points out of the playoffs right now. 22 games to go, 5 points out of the playoffs. We'll see how these final weeks of the season go for this disappointing Blackhawks team. This coming week, when we've got 4 home games in a row, is going to be critical. You would think we probably need to win at least 3 of those 4 to get ourselves in a position where we can go on the road for the next week and be playing for something potentially meaningful. And the good news is we beat Nashville on the road before we started that 4-game homestand, so that was positive. The really bad news is that Dylan Larkin, 3rd-degree MCL sprain, going to bang him up for 1 to 2 months. He's willing to consider delaying treatment until the season is over. He's been, as usual, one of our top offensive players, 27 goals, 29 assists, so 56 points in the 56 games he's played. Signed for another couple years at $6.5 million. If we were a true playoff contender, I would think about having him play through this injury. We're still 5 points out of the playoffs. Now we got games in hand on all of those teams that we're chasing. But I think a Larkin at 70 or 80%, if we have him play through this, is just not going to be making a big enough impact for us. And it means we're probably not going to see him again this year, because a month or 2 healing takes us to the end of the season, and we're probably not going to be in the playoffs. But I just don't think that at this point it's worthwhile. We're going to put him on the IL. Have him healthy and well, hopefully, for next season. And if we are able to somehow sneak into the playoffs without him, he'll probably be close to 100% by the time the playoffs are getting started. And unfortunately, we didn't get what we were looking for from the homestand. We won the first 2 games against Vegas and the Kings, and we're feeling good. And then we lost 4-1 to the Sharks and 4-1 to the Blues. So now we're headed out on the road for the next week. 4 games at Tampa Bay, Boston, Florida, and Buffalo as we make an East Coast swing. Taking a look at the standings. Still in 10th. Still 5 points out of the playoffs. Still have a game in hand on the team that we're chasing in Nashville, but haven't made any progress, and it's going to certainly get harder to make progress when we're on the road for the next week. And although the road trip ended with a shutout loss to Buffalo, it was actually a pretty successful road trip. We beat Florida and Boston, and we had an overtime loss against Tampa Bay. So I ended up with 5 points in the 4 games. Not great, but could have been much worse. 3 points out of the playoffs with still a game in hand on Nashville. So we did make up some ground on them despite being on the road for the last week. Going to still be an uphill battle for us to get into the playoffs, but over the rest of the month of March, 4 of our 6 games are at home, so hopefully we can do some damage. St. Louis is last in our division. We've got a home and home with them Friday and Sunday of the upcoming week. If we can hopefully take advantage of a pretty weak St. Louis team and then do well in our other games, we may have a chance at this when the calendar is going to be turning to April. We'll find out shortly. And the news remains good. Got a 6-1 win against Colorado, and Dylan Larkin is already ready to resume skating. Still looks like he's 1 to 2 weeks away, but think it may have been a good decision for us that we didn't try to force him to play through that injury for the rest of the year. It's been kind of a rough patch for the Blackhawks. We won against Colorado, but then lost 2 in a row at home, and then dropped on the road to St. Louis. Both of the St. Louis games were overtime losses, the only thing we've got going for us. But now we are at Vancouver and at Winnipeg to finish off the month of March. And taking a look at the conference standings, we're still 3 games out. Don't have a game in hand against the teams that we are chasing anymore, with 9 games left. So clearly against a pretty bad Vancouver team coming up today on the road. That seems like a road game that we really have to win. And unfortunately, we're lost on the road at Vancouver and then home against Winnipeg to finish off the month of March. So we are in the home stretch at this point, only 7 games left. The schedule is not in our favor. The standings are not on our favor. We're now 5 points out with 7 games left, so it's going to be real difficult for us to jump over 3 teams and sneak into the playoffs. But that is the goal, making things more challenging. Eklund, Horvat, and Marner, 3 pretty important offensive players for us, are all banged up. They are game available, but none of them are at 100% as we try to sneak this team into the playoffs. And apparently we're still basking in the glow of that championship 3 seasons ago with owner Rocky Wirtz, because he's still satisfied with our performance and thinks we're a serious contender, wants us to contend next year, but says that there's no need to worry about our job. I hope he's not just blowing smoke at us. Fans very unhappy. They still view me as the problem. Locker room is in pretty good shape. Job security, you can see, is pretty good still, but the fans are very unhappy right now, which is not good. Unhappy with a couple of recent 5-game losing streaks. Unhappy when we traded away Luke Kunin. Pretty much in open revolt with us at this point, which isn't great. Do think we can win them over if we can somehow sneak into the playoffs, but we're getting close to must-win territory. Nashville is one of the teams that we're chasing. Home game against them today, or tomorrow actually, is going to be critical. Hard to see how we can possibly make the math work if we lose at home with 7 games left to a team that we're chasing that's 5 points ahead of us. And we did get the 3-2 win against Nashville, so that was positive. The only negative is it was an overtime win, so they got a point out of it from us. Now we've got 4 games in a row, 2 against the Kings, the Sharks, and Vancouver. So that's going to be critical to our season. The Kings, one of the top teams in the Western Conference. The Sharks, near the bottom of the Pacific Division. And the Canucks not far ahead of them. So probably need to win 3 of 4, and you would think that might be a split with the Kings and then taking the games against the Canucks and the Sharks. But still in a difficult spot for us. 4 points back with 3 teams to hop over and 6 games to go. So the math is better than it could have been since we got the W, but still very challenging for us, particularly with the next 4 games being on the road. And a brutal loss yesterday, 4-1 to the Kings. Larkin getting close to returning, but with just 5 games to go, the math is getting very challenging. 7 points back of the Ducks for that final wild card spot. So theoretically, we could be eliminated. Not in our next game. Actually, we could be. If we lose and the Ducks win, we're out of it. So we're pretty much in a must-win position, which is not great when we've got 3 straight road games followed by 2 games on our home ice. And I don't think we can really afford to lose any of them. And the good news for this final stretch is that Dylan Larkin is back for these final 5 games. Came back quicker than we would have expected. Maybe too little too late, since we need to be almost perfect, but not sure that having him at 70 or 80% for the last couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, would have made all that much a difference anyways, and we might even be in a worse position than we are right now, although it is hard for me to say that with a straight face because we're in a pretty difficult spot right now. And we did bounce back with a win against the Kings, 6-4, a couple of goals from Konechny, a couple of assists from the rookie Villeneuve. So that's positive. But the standings are still very difficult. Still 7 points out, and we only have 4 games to go. So we need to be perfect, and we need the Jets or the Ducks to lose every one of their games without tying, without an overtime loss in any of them. And we need the Coyotes and the Predators to do pretty poorly also. So all we can do is take care of our own business. We do have San Jose and Vancouver, 2 teams that aren't playing for anything coming up on the road. Hopefully we can get some wins there and at least make things interesting in these final days of the season. And we did get an 8-2 win at San Jose. The rookie defense, I guess he's not a rookie, second-year defenseman Korchinski with a goal and 3 assists, a couple goals and an assist from Sillinger. Mitch Marner with a goal and 2 assists. You can see Sillinger got things started with 2 goals within the first 6:12 of the first period. So great start to the game for the Blackhawks that they needed. Are we even still mathematically in it? We still are, but only one team that we can get by now. We've still got to be perfect, and we need Anaheim to continue losing. All we can do is take care of business against Vancouver tomorrow or today. Hopefully we get a win. Hopefully Anaheim keeps losing, and at least the last couple games of the year at home may mean something. And we did do our job, 3-2 against Vancouver. We'll find out whether it mattered at all. We're still in the mix. We're tied with the Coyotes. The Ducks didn't play, so they didn't have an opportunity to get a point. With the 40 wins, we're getting to a point where if we win 2 in a row, and they get a tie or an overtime loss and 2 losses, we'd have the tiebreaker over them, and we're going to have the tiebreaker and wins over the Coyotes if we get close. If there was a percentage of making the playoffs, we'd still be in the single digits, I am sure. But we've got a chance. Final 2 games of the year for us are going to be home against Calgary and Minnesota. Taking a look at the standings, Calgary by far the best team, not just in the Pacific Division, not just in the Western Conference, but in all of the NHL. So that's definitely going to be a big challenge for us, but have to win it. At this point, we could be eliminated even before then if Anaheim gets 2 points today or tomorrow. Let's see what happens, whether Anaheim is playing today, and they did lose, so they give us some life. But now we need to go and beat the best team in hockey at home to keep our very faint playoff hopes alive. And we did go and beat Calgary. That is the good news. The bad news is the Ducks got 2 points also, so we are officially eliminated. Can't catch the Ducks or the Jets with their 92 points. They're up 3 on us with 1 game to go. So I believe this will be, as we've talked about, the 3rd time in 5 seasons that we did not make the playoffs with the Blackhawks. And I believe that it is the 3rd time in those 5 seasons that we were the first team out of the playoffs in the Western Conference. So we've gotten real good at getting close to the playoffs, but not going to be in the playoffs for a 2nd straight year. So that is definitely a big disappointment. We'll finish up with a game against a very good Wild team that is the 2nd best team in the Western Conference right now. Would be nice to finish up with a win at home, but as we've talked about, it really doesn't matter because our season is over. So we'll play the last game, just find out how close we ended up being. Did get another win, 3-2. So taking a look at the standings, we literally ended up a point behind the Ducks for that final wild card spot. So we played well down the stretch, won those last 5 games, and it still was not enough. We ended up with more wins than the Ducks, but they had more points by virtue of those 10 overtime losses compared to the 7 that we had. Positive 21 goal scoring differential on the year was basically right where the Ducks were. You can see it looks like Dallas may have got a little lucky to sneak into the playoffs, but you need some luck sometimes, and the Blackhawks did not have it this season. So Chicago, for a 2nd straight year, is on the outside looking in as the playoffs begin. The locker room is in good shape. Our job security is supposedly decent. The fans are still not pleased with us, though. You know, we did end the season with that 5-game winning streak, so positive vibes. But we still failed in our goal to get into the playoffs. In our next episode, we'll see who ends up winning the Stanley Cup. We know it won't be us. And we will also take an in-depth review on how all of our players perform this year and what our plan is for this upcoming off season, because did a little bit of a youth movement this year. I feel like we've got some young talent on the team that we may not have had a couple of seasons ago, but a couple of seasons ago we were in the playoffs, and we weren't in the playoffs this year. So we can talk about the youth movement as much as we want, but at some point we're going to have to start winning some games on the ice. And hopefully that will start with a playoff appearance next season. But we will discuss all of that and our plans for getting back to the playoffs in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.